In 2014, Scott Cawthon, an indie game developer and animator, created a survival horror video game based on criticism received from his previous game, Chipper & Sons Lumber Co. After receiving some reviews stating the characters in Chipper & Sons looked too lifeless and uncanny, much like an animatronic you'd see at Chuck E. Cheese, Scott went to work and created Five Nights at Freddy's, changing the lives of himself, the people around him, and the people that played the game online. The game is set in a pizzeria.
Welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a magical place for kids and grown-ups alike, where fantasy and fun come to life. Fazbear Entertainment is not responsible for damage to property or person. Upon discovering that damage or death has occurred, a missing person report will be filed within 90 days.
And the animatronics featured in the pizzeria will come to life late at night and roam the halls, making their way to the security office in order to mutilate the night security staff. Around the pizzeria, there are newspaper clippings mentioning the disappearances of 5 children, and an acrid smell coming from the animatronics. The game was a massive success, and with success comes capitalization. Only 3 months later, Scott would release the second installment of the franchise, even though he had announced it would be released the following year. The gameplay was overhauled from the first and had a slew of new characters added in. More story details were fleshed out, and in this game is our introduction to a pivotal character in the franchise. Sometimes when you would die in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, your game had a 1 in 10 chance to cut to an 8-bit style minigame reminiscent of old Atari 2600 games. A recurring character in these games is a man colored purple. For some time, we had no clue who this man was. Some speculated he was the man on the phone we were speaking to. Others suggested he was the character responsible for the missing children's incidents hinted at in the first game. Some people also pointed out that in Night 6, the man on the phone mentions the buildings being closed due to someone using a spare yellow suit in the back.
What on earth are you doing there? Didn't you get the memo? The place is closed down, at least for a while. Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right.
For what purpose? Well, it's not outright stated, but based on the events of the first game, we can make an educated guess. Did I forget to mention FNAF 2 is a prequel? Because, yeah, it is. Many people thought this suit was Golden Freddy, the mysterious secret character from Five Nights at Freddy's 1 that became a functional character in the second game. And whoever this purple man was, it became clear that he would become important. The following year, in March, Scott released Five Nights at Freddy's 3. The game is set 30 years after the events of the first game and has turned the various disappearances and murders surrounding Freddy Fazbear's Pizza into a horror attraction called Fazbear's Fright. In the first night of Five Nights at Freddy's 3, nothing happens. The man on the phone, affectionately named Phone Dude, elaborates that right now it's all just
flashing lights and spooky props.
And that they
thought we'd have more by now.
But they're chasing down a new lead that could bring them something worthwhile.
We're trying to track down a good lead right now. Some guy who helped design one of the buildings says it was like an extra room that got boarded up.
So, for the first night, you simply settle in, get a feel for the new controls and mechanics, and soak in the environment. This first night lulls you into a false sense of either security or panic, depending on how you are with horror games. At first, it might seem simple enough, sit back and watch the clock tick by, but for some, it might cause them to jump at shadows. The real monster isn't even in the building yet. Then comes night 2. Phone Dude calls you with an extremely animated tone of voice, stating,
We found one. A real one. It's in there somewhere. I'm sure you'll see it.
And sure enough, there it is. Sometimes hiding behind something or staying just out of sight is a worn down, sickly green bunny. At first, you might think this is Bonnie from the previous games, but Bonnie's shell is found at the end of Cam 2, so it's clearly not him. You barely have any time to process just who this animatronic could be before he's making a beeline directly for your office. Your best chance of survival is to lure him away from certain locations on the cameras by using the audio lures provided to you, and once he begins to try to creep into your office through the vents, it's time to seal him up. He's persistent as all hell and won't let up, even when he's staring directly at you in the office window. His chest is gashed wide open, and we can see there's bits of flesh mixed in with his endoskeleton. This doesn't bring up the question of who this thing is anymore, but now what he is.
Hey man, okay, I have some awesome news for you. You're not gonna believe this. We found one. A real one.
This is Springtrap. Springtrap is named after spring locks, a mechanism used briefly by Fazbear Entertainment that would allow an endoskeleton to be cranked and wound up to the sides of an animatronic, allowing it to be worn as a mascot suit. As Phone Guy warns in the audio cassette training tapes, however, they're extremely sensitive, and so much as breathing on them is enough to activate them.
Try not to nudge or press against any of the spring locks inside the suit. Do not touch the spring locks at any time. Do not breathe on the spring locks, as moisture may loosen them and cause them to break loose.
Before the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 3, whoever's inside Springtrap is the victim of a spring lock failure and sits rotting for years until he's discovered and hauled into Fazbear's Fright as the main attraction. The organizers were blissfully unaware of the danger lying inside the suit, and now that he's been awoken, there's nothing to save you other than your own wit and reflexes. Springtrap is the most unique antagonist in the franchise, not only because he's the definitive main antagonist between every game, but he's also a victim of his own hubris, the destruction of his life being entirely his own fault. For those unaware, the Purple Man, known as William Afton, alongside his business partner Henry Emily, co-founded Fredbear's Family Diner, a restaurant that would feature animatronic performers. The diner featured two animatronics upon opening, the eponymous Fredbear and his partner, Bonnie, sometimes referred to as Spring Bonnie to differentiate him from his counterparts. The diner saw much success, as there were plans to add more characters to the cast, plushies, and even a TV series for it. This all changed in 1983. William had 3 children, Elizabeth, the crying child, and Michael. Michael being the oldest sibling, he had a tendency to torment his younger brother, but it all came to a horrifying end one day, the crying child's birthday. What was supposed to be a harmless joke turned into a tragedy as the crying child was shoved forcefully into the Fredbear animatronic's mouth. The tears streaming down his face were more than enough to cause a spring lock failure and put the crying child in the hospital, where he wouldn't survive. William was devastated. The loss of his child was too much for him to bear, and seeing the happiness of his business partner, Henry, caused William to resent him. One day, during the newly opened Freddy Fazbear's Pizza's operating hours, Henry's daughter Charlotte was locked outside the pizzeria, unable to enter. William saw this as his chance to make things even, to show Henry just how much he suffered. In cold blood, William murdered Charlotte, dumping her body into the alley behind the restaurant. The security puppet at the time was unable to reach her to save her, and so when it was free, it dragged itself outside towards Charlotte in the rain, laying by her side. With this, Charlotte's spirit transferred over to the puppet. Years later, in 1985, William returned to his murder spree and, using his favorite suit, the yellow Spring Bonnie Springlock suit, he lured 5 children into a back room and killed once again. In order to hide the evidence, William shoved their bodies into the animatronics of Chica, Foxy, Bonnie, Freddy Fazbear, and the decommissioned Fredbear, now referred to as Golden Freddy. Though he'd gotten away with it once again, this wasn't the end. The puppet, watching history repeat itself, transferred the souls of the children into the animatronics. From here, William would stay quiet until the reopening of Freddy's in 1987. Donning Spring Bonnie for a second time, he lured another 5 children away from prying eyes and took their lives with no remorse. At some point during his murder sprees, he took the time to create a bunker underneath his house that would function as a workshop as well as a monitoring room for his remaining children, Michael and Elizabeth. Wanting to understand why the spirits of his victims haunted the animatronics, he began work on the Funtime animatronics, with the sole purpose of kidnapping and murdering children. 4 were created: Freddy, Foxy, Ballora, and Circus Baby, whose likeness was based on his daughter Elizabeth. Elizabeth grew very fond of Baby, but knowing what she was capable of and what she was designed to do, William forbade her from playing with her alone. As Circus Baby describes,
"There were 4, then 3, then 2, then 1. Something happened when there was 1. A little girl, standing by herself. I was no longer myself. My stomach opened, and there was ice cream. There was screaming for a moment, but only for a moment."
And immediately murders Elizabeth, as she was designed to do. William had lost yet another child to his own creation, and was forced to close his restaurant before it was even open. 2 children, 2 deaths. 11 children, 11 murders. Wherever William went, death and destruction followed, even to himself. At some point after the events of the first 5 Nights at Freddy's game, William returned to the newest iteration of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza to end it all forever. One by one, night by night, he lured the robotic graves of his victims towards a back room that they couldn't access. It disassembled them. When the final night arrived, the children had gathered into the room, blocking his escape. 4 blocked the exit while a 5th chases after William, before he has the idea to hide inside the Spring Bonnie suit. Decrepit and disheveled as it may have been, it was still his signature, and something the children would recognize. Feeling cocky, like he'd escaped, he laughed at them. The state of the building was not at all up to code. Rats and moisture seeped in. Water droplets fell to the floor. Either unaware or blinded by panic, William forgot how sensitive the spring locks in the suit really were. They immediately snapped shut, dozens of metal components locking back into place, with William still inside. His body was shredded, torn. He couldn't even scream. His vocal cords had been sliced open. All he could do was collapse, watch as the children vanished, leaving him to his painful and gruesome demise. But something inside William wouldn't let him die. He would come back. And so 30 years later, in 2023, someone looking to capitalize off the ghost stories of the legendary Freddy Fazbear's Pizza goes digging around and discovers a secret room in one of the locations. In this secret room lies a bunny suit, once gold, now rotten green, torn with age, and smelling of death. For an attraction that only held broken costume shelves and old drawings, this was a gold mine, an authentic animatronic. William, now dubbed Springtrap, had been relocated and placed into the attraction. Reawakened after decades, thirsting for blood, he now stalks you, the player, hell-bent on seeing you suffer. Wow, that's quite a backstory, I know. Springtrap was an enigma at the time prior to the 3rd installment's release. Some thought he was an amalgamation of the previous animatronics, while some assumed he was Golden Freddy. A smaller section of theorizers predicted he would have been Golden Bonnie, but nobody could have predicted that he was the purple guy reincarnated. The reveal was groundbreaking. Finally, face to face with the infamous purple guy, who had been the center of so many theories. His story would get fleshed out in the later installments, but here, in this moment, with almost nothing being known about him at the time, the excitement online was palpable, and once the game dropped, even more excitement began. The buzz around Springtrap continued even beyond 5 Nights at Freddy's 3, as he would make appearances in 5 Nights at Freddy's 4, Sister Location, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, Ultimate Custom Night, Five Nights at Freddy's, Help Wanted, Special Delivery, Security Breach, and the latest media installment to the franchise, the Five Nights at Freddy's film, where William/Springtrap was portrayed by Matthew Lillard. While one part of Springtrap's appeal was definitely his character, a rotting zombified murderer killed at the hands of his own creation, another was in Springtrap's design itself. William/Springtrap has had a multitude of designs across the series, but most will point to his appearance in Five Nights at Freddy's 3 as one of the best designs in the entire franchise, and quite possibly in horror gaming. As stated earlier, Springtrap has gone through quite a few designs. They're separated into two eras, pre-Springlock and post-Springlock. In the pre-Springlock era, he's the notorious purple guy, the serial child murderer and antagonist of the first two games, even though at the time we didn't know much about him. As revealed by his fairly obvious nickname, he's an 8-bit model of a man colored purple. Sometimes the shapes and variations change, which led some people in the early days of the fandom to theorize that these were two different characters. But once the purple motif became synonymous with the child murders, people realized it was more of a stylistic choice rather than differentiation between characters. In the final phone call of the second game, we hear that someone has used a spare yellow suit, and with what we know about William, it's clear that he used the Spring Bonnie suit to lure more children away so that they could be killed, which is our first mention of the Springlock suit's existence. Their purpose and function is expanded upon in 3, but that's not here nor there. In Five Nights at Freddy's 3, we finally get our first look at the golden Spring Bonnie animatronic suit, post-Springlock accident. Age has worn and eaten at the suit, causing massive gashes to form in the suit itself, as well as it saturating into a dark, sickly green color. If you're paying enough attention, inside the suit are chunks of flesh, and his eyes. They're completely different from any other animatronic we've seen so far. When it comes to white glowing eyes, we'd usually see them in the animatronics that are being controlled by something more than their default programming, and it's always implied supernatural causes within the series. While most of these appearances are simply black empty sockets with small white pupils, Springtrap's are different. His gaze is unending, peering directly into your soul, and yet despite the lack of life we see within the suit itself, there's an unusual amount of humanity in his eyes. His body leans and holds positions that no other animatronic has held before. When on cameras, he attempts to hide out of sight, instead peering from an edge, and this behavior even carries over to when he appears directly outside your office door. He's not trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with him. The moment he was dropped into Fazbear's fright, he's been studying you, watching you. Now, unlike the other animatronics featured in the franchise, Springtrap is aggressive, but unlike the others, he is incredibly so. To the point that Five Nights at Freddy's 3's hardest difficulty is called Aggressive Mode, where in the others it's referred to as 20 Mode, or Golden Freddy Mode. As the nights go on, he becomes faster and more squirmish. Keeping him in one place more often will cause your tools to malfunction, which forces you to fix your systems and gives him the perfect opportunity to make his move. Staring at Springtrap makes you feel on edge, panicked. Your breathing becomes heavy. All the images of robotic mascots and dead children begin to pick at your oxygen-deprived brain, causing you to see things that aren't really there. And once you think things can't get any worse, he appears, and causes your night of chaos to end abruptly. Now, pause. Here's Springtrap's weakest point, and the only thing stopping him from reaching his true potential as a villain. His jump scare. God damn it. And he's here. Fuck! God, fuck! Fuck! I was at 4 AM too! God damn it! He just sort of stumbles towards you. In his right jump scare, he opens his mouth slightly, revealing some of his gnarled remains hidden underneath, but these are on much better display in a set of secret screens you can see on occasion when starting the game up. For such an amazing villain with a sickening backstory as a child murderer and such a disturbingly grotesque design, he should have had a better jump scare. But I'd like to propose this. William Afton has always been a methodical man. His murder sprees all go the same way, luring 5 children into a back room using the golden Spring Bonnie suit. To hide the bodies, he places them in the one place he knew nobody would think to look, inside the animatronics. It was all according to plan, by his design. The Funtime animatronics were completely his own creations, meticulously built and programmed to read the number of children in a room, kidnapping them when isolated. The only fault in this programming was his daughter's own inquisitive nature. William is a man of science, of numbers, and him slowly stalking and lurking towards your office reflects this. When he slowly lumbers towards you, he does it in a manner that is much smoother than any other animatronic has previously. In the first game, they were jumpy and twitchy. In the second, they were robotic and mechanical. Springtrap's, however, feels organic, like he really is a man barely hanging on to the little life he has left, encumbered by the suit he made his own too. But that's just a theory. Now here comes my biggest complaint about Springtrap. My two biggest complaints actually, and they're no surprise to anyone who's been around the series for long enough. The existences of Scraptrap, or Afton, in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, and Burntrap at the end of Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach's canon ending. With such a popular character as Springtrap, people knew he would make a return at some point. In Five Nights at Freddy's sister location during the Custom Night secret cutscene, we see Springtrap escaping from the burned rubble of Fazbear's Fright, supposedly hiding in the shadows until the events of Pizzeria Simulator, where he returns as simply Afton, but is sometimes referred to by the community as Scraptrap. Now, design-wise, Scraptrap is an oddity. Scott Cawthon has gone on record saying that he's not very good at modeling humans, so his proportions are very misshapen and at some points even comical. For instance, between Five Nights at Freddy's 3 and Pizza Simulator, he gained ears. Ears are made of cartilage, not bone, and would more than likely rot away during William's time in the suit. Another noticeable change is in his eye color. While in FNAF 3 they were more organic looking and thought to be William's natural eyes, in Pizza Sim this was replaced with the mechanical and silvery eyes of the Spring Bonnie suit. Now, all of these things wouldn't be so much of a problem if the design of Scraptrap wasn't already more confusing and improbable than Springtrap. William's skull is much more pronounced and visible in Pizza Sim with a massive hole in the top of the suit's head, and random bits of flesh protruding from certain areas, including a skull. Springtrap also had this fleshy texture going around, but in the art style change between 3 and Pizza Sim, a lot of this flesh was replaced with a brighter and more stringy substance. And to get it out of the way now, Scraptrap's head is much larger in Pizza Sim, to the point that for most people, it's the sole reason why his design fails. But where Scraptrap lacks in design in the light, he excels at in the dark, when you're sat across from him, playing unnerving audio from the cassettes. Spurred on by the man on the cassettes, you have to sit there and stare at this monster that you know well is a dangerous murderer, and you have to take your eyes off him in order to write down your findings on a sheet. The moment you look away and he stares up at you, a new sense of dread fills you. And in the climactic finale of the game, when the pizzeria burns around you as Henry Emily says his piece to those William had murdered, he screams out in pain, as his former friend condemns him to death, hoping nothing but the deepest pits of hell for William.
Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole, so don't keep the devil waiting, friend.
And then, silence. The story of William Afton, and therefore Springtrap, was over. Until his consciousness was transferred into a video game, which then got downloaded into some girl, which then got downloaded back into his own body, which burned and then got snatched by Funtime Freddy at the end of Security Breach, but that's a whole other can of worms. All I'll say for now is that while William's catchphrase is, "I always come back," I feel like he should have stayed away from this game. But that doesn't mean his appearance should completely be thrown out the window. In fact, seeing Springtrap again makes me all the happier. And in late 2023, Springtrap made the jump from video games to live action in the Five Nights at Freddy's movie starring Josh Hutcherson, Piper Rubio, Elizabeth Lail, and Matthew Lillard. In the film, William is once again the founder of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and a serial killer, using the Spring Bonnie suit to lure and murder children in the back of Freddy Fazbear's, stuffing their bodies into the animatronics. In the film, he bears a much more yellow appearance than his video game counterpart, though he does still carry much of the same gashes and dirt the original Springtrap suit holds. In the film, instead of the spring locks being activated by moisture, when the children possessing the suits confront William, facing down their killer, the Cupcake Chica holds attacks, biting the suit in the stomach. This is enough force to cause the spring locks to immediately start snapping back into place, and with his last bit of breath, he mutters, "I always come back." Much like in the game, we get a final scene of Springtrap bleeding out in a back room as the ghost watches, his suffering satisfactory enough for them. And there we have it. From games to graphic novels to now films, Springtrap has remained, as he always has and always will. And you know what? Despite what the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise has done to Springtrap over the last few years, from killing him not once but 3 times, I still love the character. He's such an interesting part of the series. Nothing would be the same if Springtrap didn't exist. I wanted to make a Five Nights at Freddy's video like this for quite a long time, and I thought, what better topic to make a video about than Springtrap, a personal favorite character of mine and pivotal character for the franchise, from 2015 all the way to 2023. From engineering genius to serial child murderer, zombified robot bunny to digital reconstruction, Springtrap will always be front and center to the franchise. The series may be called Five Nights at Freddy's, but at the end of the day, the franchise is about the Aftons, more specifically William, and the destruction of everyone around him, because of him. No matter how many times he's kept at bay, he always finds a way to continue his demented schemes, because, as he always says, "I always come back." This video was a very, very tedious and fun process to make because while I was editing, I was listening to Five Nights at Freddy's songs that I was really into back in 2015, 2016, back when everything was still at its peak, and it just got a lot of nostalgia going through, and it was really fun to make these pixel art segments, so I hope you guys enjoyed them. I know they went on for a little too long and kind of messed with the pacing of the video, but it kind of spiraled into this, oh, I want to make a quick pixel art segment to show the missing children's incident. Well, since I'm at it, I might as well reanimate the Springlock scene. Well, maybe I should also animate when Purple Guy gets discovered as Springtrap. Well, you know what, I could also animate, you know, when Fazbear's Fright burns down, and then it just kept on going and going, and I didn't know when to stop. But if you made it to the end of the video, I want you to comment, I don't know, Springtrap is my baby daddy, and then I'll know that you watched to the end. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, I really appreciate it. So yeah, I'll see you in the next video.